Hello and welcome to the Gaggle where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, um, yesterday the United States fired on some boats in the Caribbean, and President Trump was very proud of this accomplishment. Said that this was a boat carrying drugs for the heading towards the United States, and claimed that 11 people, he was obviously very proud, 11 people were killed during this strike. Um, Now, what was kind of
He used the word kinetic.
yes, so it was very yeah, exactly. So
I found that very disturbing.
yes, I mean, if you look at this, just take a look at this truth that he sent out. And here we have earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibilities. And then this Tren de Aragua is a designated foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the United States and the Western Hemisphere. The strike occurred while the terrorists were at sea in international waters transporting illegal narcotics heading to the United States. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States. Now, beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, let me just go back. Um, so, what's interesting is that Marco Rubio, who was also thinking in those, was asked about this. All right, let me asked about this, and he gave a an interesting response in the kind of very brief news conference about the strike. So just watch what he says.
There's no volume, George. There we go.
You can't hear it?
Now we can. Yeah.
What about now? Can you hear this?
That's the drug vessel. It's carrying drugs. I'll refer you to the Pentagon. They'll give you more details on that when in the next. I anticipate shortly. I think probably while we're in the air. How many deaths with the Libra force? Again, look, I'm trying to be evasive. I'll let the Pentagon answer that. Suffice it to say that the president is going to be on offense against drug cartels and drug trafficking in the United States. It destabilizes not just the country, but the entire Caribbean basin. These particular drugs were probably headed to Trinidad and some other country in the Caribbean, at which point they just contribute to the instability these countries are facing. So the president's been very clear that he's going to use the full power of America, the full might of the United States, to take on and eradicate these drug cartels, no matter where they're operating from and no matter how long they've been able to act with impunity. Those days are over. The vessels are still in the region. Do you plan those operations? Do you expect those operations to continue? I think as long as those vessels are in the region and as long as the president's in the White House, he's made very clear he's not going to allow the United States to continue to be flooded with cocaine and fentanyl and other drugs coming from different places. This one from Venezuela, which is a common route. But by the way, some of it ends up in Europe. A lot of it ends up in Puerto Rico and then on into the United States mainland. So no one should be surprised. That's why they're there on a counter-drug mission, and they're going to continue to operate. As far as specifics and future operations, I have to refer you to the Pentagon on that. This is a DoD operation. All right? Facility is operated by a cartel. Can you share which cartel is operating? Again, I'll let the operators discuss all of that. But I thought it was, the president was very clear, and that is we destroyed a drug boat that left Venezuela, operated by a designated narco-terrorist organization, which is what these are. And he's been clear that the days of acting with impunity and having an engine shot down or a couple drugs grabbed off a boat, those days are over. Now we are going to wage combat against drug cartels that are flooding American streets and killing Americans. Will you take out the Maduro regime? The legal authority? Yeah. Well, look, again, I'm not going to answer for the White House counsel. Suffice it to say that all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But that, of course, does raise the very interesting
That's the center of all of this. Okay.
exactly, because now the way this whole thing started was that on the very first day of the bit that I guess we didn't play is that he said that the drugs were heading towards Trinidad and Tobago. So Trump said they were heading for the United States, but Marco Rubio said no, they're heading for Trinidad and Tobago. But so and but you know but the legal authorities, because day one, Trump said, "Oh, I'm going to declare the narco terrorists a terrorist organization," and then he thinks, "Well, okay, that means once they're terrorists, I can call them a terrorist organization. I can pretty much do what I like with them." But that doesn't quite work because it's not strict. You can't just do whatever you like to anything that you deem to be a terrorist organization. So just a reminder what he did on January the 20th of this year. That that afternoon he went back to the Oval Office and and then here he says this is designating cartels and this is yeah, where's it? Yeah, designating blah, blah, by the authority invested in me, blah 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 blah. The international cartels will be designated foreign terrorist organizations, and then he says that means blocking property and prohibiting transactions with persons who threaten to commit, or support terrorism. But that's all that it really means. When you determine something as a terrorist organization, it doesn't mean, oh, well, now I can go and start killing people at will because I've called them terrorists. He said, well, that blocks property. So that means if you engage with these organizations that we call terrorists, you might be liable to going to criminal prosecution or civil suit or whatever. So it's just a warning. Don't engage in any kind of activity. It doesn't quite say you can go and shoot them whenever you want. But here was what he was saying: there's international cartels, the national security threat, and so on. They're engaged in a campaign of violence and terror through the Western Hemisphere. And there's not only destabilized countries and flooded the U.S. with deadly drugs, violent criminals, and vicious gangs. But I think Trump always wanted to do this. He always wanted to go after these cartels. I think he really wanted to do it during his first term. And that's why this was really his first act, almost his first act, certainly in that first day in office, that he designated them as terrorist organizations. And so you can say here, campaign of assassination, terror, rape, and so on. But here's a story in the New York Times, which did, examine the whole issue of what is Trump's legal authority in going after cartels that are deemed to be a terrorist organization. Now, I guess the issue is still, we can argue about the legality, but isn't that a kind of almost like a waste of time? Because I mean, the United States is just going to do whatever it's going to do. I mean, you can go and well, that's against the international law, blah blah blah, blah. Okay, fine. Um, but these are nice arguments, but it's still the United States still gets to do whatever it really wants to do.
Yeah, but what it's going to also do, George, is that it will damage all of these countries in the Western Hemisphere, their sovereignty. I mean,
Right.
if these countries cannot have any kind of defense against external military operations against them, I mean, this is just another phase of the war on drugs that is an utter failure. I mean, I take a very conservative position on all. First of all, I think what Trump is doing is nuts. I don't think it's going to change anything. It's going to increase instability in many countries in the hemisphere. And to top it all off, and this is my old-fashionedness, is that why is there such a huge demand for illicit drugs in the United States? There must be something wrong in that country where, it's, when George and I
Right. Yeah. But okay.
now, let me finish my point here, okay? Is that, it was beer and marijuana, okay? And then, Coke came in the 80s and all of that. And now it's like fentanyl. I mean, it's just going up the escalation ladder here. I mean, what has been done to deal
well,
with
yes,
that?
but that, I don't think it's unique to the United States. I mean, I think drugs are a scourge pretty much everywhere. I mean that and other countries deal with drugs
Yeah.
much more harshly than the United
Yeah.
States.
Like Iran, like Singapore. Yes.
Turkey, Russia, China. I mean, they all these countries and Europe. It's a huge problem in Europe. And now Europeans don't deal with it as brutally, but other countries deal with the drug scourge brutally. So it's a problem everywhere, and that's why I don't think that I've never thought that the policy of, oh well, let's just legalize it, and
No,
that's
I'm not.
fine.
Oh no,
No, I
I'm
know you're
going
not
the
saying
other
that, but that's why
direction.
I've never taken that view because and say, okay, well let's have it because I think it is destructive. I mean,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
are
Well,
very
George, if you're
dangerous
going to have a
substances.
defense budget of $1 trillion a year, then get serious about not making sure it doesn't make it into the country. I mean, if there's a country in the world that has the resources and the money, even if you have to print it and go into debt, it's the United States. Okay, so if it is that kind of scourge, which it is, then a whole lot more has to be done with it. But killing 11 people on a
Well,
random ship.
that's it, and then you have to wonder, and I think this is why we can talk about the legality, which is interesting. I mean, it's an interesting kind of if you want to get into legalistic arguments as to what the legal basis of something is. That's one thing, but the question then is this really just a cover for something else, namely regime change
Well,
in
in the case of
Venezuela? That's
Venezuela,
so so
in,
we can separate this issue, the legality, what's the basis of making these attacks, to something that clearly is illegal, which is the attempt to overthrow
well,
Maduro.
or just to rephrase what George said, is that so? Where does most of the drugs come from? Illicit drugs that enter the United States by boat or across the border? Okay, I would say probably across the border. Okay, they're not just flying it in, and they're not shipping in by boat. And it is no coincidence this was off the coast of Venezuela. George is absolutely right. This is who cares about the legal? I mean, I care about it, but will the United States ever be held accountable for it? Of
No, no,
course not.
no,
Okay,
no.
but this is about regime change, and you know, this is what they did to Noriega.
Well,
Noriega.
that's right. It's a very interesting. Um, there is exactly that's what they did to Noriega. Um, how you go from country to country, and there's always some different reason to affect regime change. So, what was it in say in Syria? Syria, the problem was chemical weapons plus. Oh, he was brutalizing his own population. Gaddafi, what was his problem? Oh, he was threatening genocide.
Yeah, Benghazi, right.
That's right, Benghazi.
Giving his troops Viagra. Yeah.
That's right, exactly. Noriega, we had the issue of drugs. What was it with Saddam Hussein? Oh, that was weapons of mass destruction. Iran, what's the issue with Iran? Oh, Iran has nuclear weapons or is on the brink of getting nuclear
Or
weapons.
just be simple. They're Muslim.
Yeah.
And the
So
Russians, though they want to take over the world.
they
Okay.
want to, yeah. So there's always it's interesting, and what's it in Serbia? Oh yeah, they're another ones who are genocidal. So you pick your country, and then you pick your reason as to why, and then not to mention all the other countries that get bombed on a regular basis in Africa. We don't even bother
You
thinking
know
about.
what do you when you go to the fair and you roll the wheel and they have like different numbers or prizes. I think sometimes in Langley they say so let's see, Honduras. Okay, let's flip the wheel, guys. See which one works. Okay,
Right.
but I'm agreeing with George. It's kind of arbitrary.
It's
Okay.
really arbitrary, but you always find the reason. Anyway, so here's the New York Times, and it says that President Trump has secretly signed a directive to the Pentagon to begin using military force against certain Latin American drug cartels that his administration has deemed terrorist organization. And the
George,
decision
let
to
me ask you a question, and this is not a trick question,
Mhm.
okay? Or I'll put it differently. When I think of Venezuela, I don't think it is a big drug export country. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, it's very interesting how they suddenly have fixated on Venezuela, um, and as we'll look in a bit. I mean, it doesn't look as if the case is particularly compelling. I mean, they may well be drugs coming out from Venezuela, but it's the way they presented it as if this is really the center of drug trafficking.
I thought oil was the big thing
The
there.
oil, yeah, that's right. Um, but it's also, I mean, this goes back to what we started saying is that it's very odd. I mean, if you think here's a vessel that you claim is transporting drugs, so why don't you just board the vessel, seize it, arrest the people on board, and then tow the ship to whatever to the nearest port, and then bring criminal charges or whatever. It's a strange thing to start shooting. I mean, and killing, which is what Trump is boasting about.
Well,
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's a weird way of fighting a drug war.
did anyone on board fire back? Did they find any guns? I mean,
I don't know.
where the was the kinetic force the result of self-defense? I
Well, that's the
mean,
thing. I mean, exactly. I think that's a very good point. I mean, was this self-defense or did they just start shooting? That already raises all sorts of legal questions. Did you start just shooting and without even any kind of provocation? Did you make any attempt to make make an arrest? Did they resist arrest or whatever? Just simply shooting. And I guess that's how this is where you get into this legal thing. Oh, well, it's a terrorist organization. Again, I don't know how you can establish just from the sight of a boat that this is obviously part of some terrorist network.
yeah, maybe they didn't want to find American arms that were sent to Ukraine on board.
And it says the decision to bring the American military into the fight is the most aggressive step so far in the administration's escalating campaign against the cartels.
Or against Venezuela.
Yes. It signals Mr. Trump's continued willingness to use military forces to carry out what has primarily been considered a law enforcement responsibility to curb the flow of fentanyl and other illegal drugs. So this secret order provides an official basis for the possibility of direct military operations at sea and on foreign soil against cartels. And then the U.S. military officials have started drawing up options for how the military could go after groups. But then the Times goes on, but directing the military to crack down on the illicit trade raises legal issues, including whether it would count as murder if U.S. forces acting outside of a congressionally authorized armed conflict were to kill civilians or even criminal suspects who pose no imminent
Imminent
threat,
threat.
which could well be involved in this case. But I haven't seen any details. I mean, the only details we know so far is what Trump's claimed. So we don't know exactly, how they've already been able to establish 11 people were killed and what were the
Did,
circumstances of their death.
did you see the image that was released? That
Yeah, I saw that.
scrunchy
Yeah,
black and white. What
yeah, yeah.
that?
Right. Um, and then and they said the Trump blah blah. And then in February, the State Department designated Tren de Aragua, MS-13, as foreign terrorist organizations. Um, and then 2 weeks ago, the Trump administration added the Venezuelan Cartel de los Soles to a list of specially designated global terrorist groups, asserting that it is
Apparently, that doesn't even really exist.
right, right. That's right. I think we'll come to that
Oh, I'm
exactly. There
sorry.
doesn't seem to be any evidence that it actually does exist. And then he says claims Maduro is the head of all of this. Which is also surprising because I thought, Maduro was this socialist. I mean, all the time we've been told, oh, he's a socialist, he's a communist, he wants to bring in, collective ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. Now it turns out he's a drug lord. That's um, and the Navy has long participated in intercepting vessels in international waters that are suspected of smuggling drugs towards the United States. But still, intercepting is a different issue. But naval ships typically do so as a law enforcement operation, and it's generally illegal to use the military to perform law enforcement functions. But Mr. Trump's new directive appears to envision a different approach focused on US forces directly capturing or killing people involved in the drug trade. Legal specialists said that under US law, imposing sanctions against a group by declaring it a terrorist entity can block its asset and make it harder for its members to do business or travel, but does not provide legal authority for wartime style operations targeting with armed force. Um, so and that's the thing. I mean, is that if you call something terrorist, where do you get off immediately declaring that now you can use lethal force? Now there is this AUMF, that thing that they passed in 2001, but that still has that in some ways is still connected with 9/11. It's going to be hard to link these narco terrorists with the 9/11 attacks. I think it would quite, they would at the very least have to pass some new legislation to say that, hey, the AUMF also um, applies to
Yeah,
the drug
I'm
cartels.
pretty sure that's what Sean Hannity is saying tonight. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, and then it says there are domestic legal constraints. Congress legally authorized the U.S. the use of military force against Al Qaeda. But that authorization does not extend to any and all groups the executive branch calls terrorists.
And forever.
And forever, yes. And it's hard to think it's getting on for a quarter of a century. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. That means military action against cartels would apparently have to rely on a claim about Mr. Trump's constitutional authority to act in national defense, perhaps against fentanyl overdoses. And then it's not clear what rules of engagement would govern military action against cartels, but any operation that set out to kill people based on their suspected status as members of a sanctioned cartel and outside the context of an armed conflict would raise legal issues involving laws against murder and a long-standing executive order banning assassinations, said this former State Department lawyer. This is all very, very interesting, and you think, yeah, and is any of this going to make any difference? I mean, it's like,
Well, I mean, George, I mean, this is just red meat, the way I look at it, okay? Trump came in, he wants to have a new war on drugs,
right,
war on
right,
fentanyl, and he's giving, this is how he feels he's honoring that promise, okay?
right.
What material impact on the drug trade will have, I have no
No, I
idea.
have no.
It's all also a switch and bait. Oh, Maduro, after all, is a drug lord. I didn't
Right,
know
exactly, and
that. Okay.
that's really the key here. Is that it's very interesting. They've selected Maduro as the one that then it says they could carry out capture operation, reserving lethal force for self-defense. But it doesn't sound like they were making any kind of a capture operation with this boat. But here's a tweet from Gustavo Petro, who's the president of Colombia, and he's the one who said the cartel of the Suns, which we just talked about, the Soles, does not exist. It is the fictitious excuse of the extreme right to overthrow governments that do not obey them. The passage of Colombian cocaine through Venezuela is controlled by the Drug Trafficking Board, and its bosses live in Europe and the Middle East. I propose to the USA and Venezuela that we together destroy that cartel. It's about coordinating, not subjugating. The political problem in Venezuela must be resolved among Venezuelans themselves through dialogue and more democracy. A decarbonized Venezuela should be the goal. The great Colombia, a world power of life, and the central pillar of Latin American unity, and so on. So he seems to be disputing that Maduro is the head of any kind of a drug cartel. And then here, this is quite interesting. This is from the National Intelligence Council, which is, that's the consensus, the intelligence community of the United States. So this is not just anybody. This is the United States. And this comes from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which is Tulsi Gabbard. And here it says, Tren de Aragua is a transnational gang based in Venezuela that has spread to at least 7 South American and Caribbean countries, operating in loosely organized cells of localized individual criminal networks. TDA leaders have historically been located and broadly benefited from various permissive conditions and incapacities in Venezuela. They probably communicate to varying degrees with some TDA cells in other countries, and so on. And then it goes on. Maduro regime leadership probably sometimes tolerates TDA's presence in Venezuela, and some government official may cooperate with TDA for financial gain. Instances of regime officials' cooperation with various armed and criminal groups, such as the Colombia's National Liberation Army, so on, have been ad hoc and reportedly driven by the regime's desire for help controlling territory or deterring a perceived threat of invasion, or for individual financial gain. The Maduro regime generally does not impede illegal armed and criminal groups from operating in Venezuela, but it does combat and seek to contain them when it fears they could destabilize the regime or when corrupt deals sour. Venezuela's security services lack the capacity to fully control Venezuelan territory, giving the regime an interest in cooperating with armed groups for insight and control in areas outside the service's traditional areas of operation. Furthermore, combating such groups often results in personnel losses, probably in encouraging the regime to at times cooperate with some groups instead of contesting them.
Well, this is really quite remarkable, George. I mean, coming out of Tulsi Gabbard's
Right.
shop, this is quite interesting.
Very interesting. You say basically, they're forced to cooperate, but it doesn't say that they're in any way leading this group. And so
They're more of a nuisance.
Exactly. Some mid to low level Venezuelan officials probably profit from TDA's illicit activities and so on. For example, local military officials have alerted other armed and criminal groups conducting aerial drug shipments to Venezuela's Air Force patrols and might have alerted TDA leadership of a planned raid in 2023 against the prison that was its base of operations.
Its prison was a base of
That was the
operations.
prison, but the raid would have been a raid by the government. So I mean, so they're in prison and they've been raided by the government. So that doesn't sound as if it's Maduro is in charge. I mean, they're in prison. While Venezuela's permissive environment enables TDA to operate, the Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movements to and operations in the United States. The intelligence community bases this judgment on Venezuelan law enforcement actions demonstrating the regime treats TDA as a threat, an uneasy mix of cooperation and confrontation rather than top-down directives, characterizing the regime's ties to other armed groups and the decentralized makeup of TDA that would make such a relationship logistically challenging. Furthermore, most of the intelligence community judges that intelligence indicating that regime leaders are directing or enabling TDA migration to the United States is not credible and would need reporting corroborated. So basically, Tulsi Gabbard in April, she was quite busy in April. That was the time when she said, I don't think Iran has any interest in building nuclear weapons. But it doesn't sound as if Trump once again listened to Tulsi. Um, um, anyway, then it goes on. And then here's a think tank, Inside Crime, and it says U.S. sanctions mischaracterize Venezuela's cartel of the sun. And so the U.S. government's new sanctions against Venezuela's so-called cartel of the suns incorrectly portray it as a hierarchical, ideologically driven drug trafficking organization rather than a profit-based system of generalized corruption involving high-ranking military figures. This is basically U.S. Treasury Department Office of Foreign Affairs, blah blah, specially designated, so on, and then it says, while considerable evidence has shown the Venezuelan government and military figures do profit from drug trafficking, the latest U.S. sanctions presented an inaccurate image of how the Cartel of the Suns operates. Rather than a hierarchical organization with Maduro directing drug trafficking strategies, the cartel is more accurately described as a system of corruption wherein military and political officials profit by working with drug traffickers. And officials are not necessarily directly involved with drug shipments, though in certain cases military vehicles may be used to move drugs. More often, officials use their positions to protect traffickers from arrest and ensure that shipments pass through a territory. But you see, when they say arrest,
Just run-of-the-mill corruption here.
exactly, when it says arrest, then I'm assuming arrest from the Venezuelan law enforcement authorities. In other words, that's just corruption. And when people hear that there's an imminent arrest, there are corrupt officials who issue warnings. Hey, you better make yourself scarce. You're about to be arrested. Yeah, that's the corruption. So it says Maduro and other high-ranking officials permit this kind of corruption to ensure the loyalty of lower ranks, but the decentralized nature of its structure means the removal of individual high-ranking officials would likely have zero impact on how the broader network operates. And then
Pretty interesting business plan, huh?
very, and then he says, and then it says it's a system driven by pragmatism and profit, not ideology. It says basically, the whole idea that this is an attack to undermine the integrity of the United States is not the case. Maduro, like Chavez before him, has bought the loyalty of the military by allowing its members from the poorly paid rank and file to the high-ranking officials whose support he needs in order to stay in power.
I said as much, not specifically about drugs, but I said as much last week when we talked about
That's
this.
right. Yeah. The drugs that flow from Venezuela to international markets support the system, but they do little to contribute to instability in destination countries. Moreover, the drug's destination is determined by profitability first. The shipments flow to European countries with less openly hostile relations with Venezuela, as well as supposed ideological enemies like the United States. And then, anyway, so that goes on. And so we can see here that the case that somehow Maduro is the head of anything is very flimsy. I mean, it's just, even the people, Trump's own intelligence community says that I don't think there's corruption. There are people turning a blind eye, letting drugs flow to the United States, to Europe, and whatever. But there's no evidence that Maduro is directing anything and directing it at the United States with the deliberate intention of subverting the United States.
But that's not what Fox viewers get to
No,
learn. No.
no,
This is I'm sorry, this is bread and circuses, George. I mean,
right.
I find it really, really absurd. I mean, everybody, all of us, anyone watching this, known someone in their life with substance abuse, and it's really, really ugly, and it's really painful, and it affects people far and wide. And I would really love to see a crackdown on this, but I don't see this kind of nonsense, this buffoonery.
Right.
Okay. I mean, just as we said, I mean, we're not so straight-laced. I mean, there's a lot of things I can tolerate, but I mean, did these guys shoot at you? I mean,
Right.
if they weren't shooting at you, I mean, why am I doing this? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
that's right. I just simply start, shooting, and on the basis of what? I mean, this. You really don't have. This is in international waters, and you start shooting, and say, "Well, are you at war? I mean, is you declared
yeah,
war against someone, and that you can just start shooting at a boat and killing people, without that you didn't make any attempt, to
did you
board."
find any
Yeah,
drugs?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. What happened after you shot these people? Did you find any drugs on the boat? I mean, I guess with Trump, he this is probably a very easy one for him because ultimately nobody really cares. There's no real danger. You're not heading towards World War III. You can,
Check, check,
yeah,
check. Okay, Alligator Alcatraz, it's been closed, but it was open, and Trump's
that's good.
fulfilled his promise. Okay, again, this is just bread and circuses. Okay, it's not changing
No,
the
I
reality
mean
of
that's
anything.
right. That's in a way that's what the United States is actually always like quite good at, which is
Yeah,
to pick on small
yeah,
countries,
yeah.
give them a good whooping, and then say, "Whoa, that's where look how strong we are." And in a way, you can say, "Well, that's quite shrewd." You never want to go and get yourself into a fight with somebody who can fight back. That's a serious business, and then you get yourself into trouble, which is what Biden did. And I think obviously he does despise Biden for having got the United States into that mess in Ukraine. I think Trump would have been much shrewder had he been there in 2022. But nonetheless, what Biden and what the United States does, it fights Panama, Haiti, Nicaragua, Serbia, Libya. It does those things very well. I mean, these are all much smaller, much
Well,
weaker.
and if it doesn't go well, well, so what?
If it doesn't, yeah, but and that's right. Now sometimes it makes mistakes. I mean, it does. Vietnam, once they quickly realized this isn't going to be a pushover, they said, okay, well, we better just simply, pull up and leave. Get out. So that sometimes it just doesn't go well. Iraq also, they said, hey, this is not going to be so easy, and then they quickly decide, okay, we're going to leave, and then leave the mess for somebody else. But this is these are easy things. So they can go. Trump can go on thumping Maduro, threatening Maduro, and I would imagine it's quite possible that they're going to start bombing Venezuela in the near future.
Well,
And coming up with some
George
phony
is
justification.
absolutely spot on this one. No, we're not going to war with Iran. No, we just hit these installations.
Right.
And the same thing, George is prophetic here. They'll do the same thing with Venezuela. We're not at war, and we're not.
We're not a vote, exactly. We're
It's
just
not
target
regime
exactly.
change,
Yeah.
okay?
Right.
Okay.
We're just targeting, very, very targeted at I mean, and they can pretty much, decide anything. They can just target, oh, well, here's Venezuelan government buildings. Oh, we'll hit this Venezuelan armory.
This is where Maduro's gold is.
Exactly, this is the way his gold is. He stores his gold. Yeah, they can do that, and they can just keep pummeling it, and they'll get good publicity. Some people will ask, no doubt, well, what's your legal justification for this? Well, he's head of a narco-terrorist
Well, yeah, I mean,
organization that threatens the United States.
Yemen. No,
Right.
we're not at war with Yemen,
No,
okay?
exactly, exactly.
We're at war with a terrorist group, okay? And we're only targeting them.
Right.
Maduro is is head of a vast narco-terrorist organization. We're just going after his organization and
We're
his
gonna have
soldiers.
to. That's right.
Going after the no, not Venezuela. No,
Right.
that's George is absolutely right.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it's an easy one. You say you can bomb them quite easily. You see, invading. I mean, they're not going to invade the Venezuela. That's a really difficult undertaking.
And
But
and plus,
bombing, that's easy.
but plus, there's a number of scenarios here, but taking out Maduro, whatever taking out means, it wouldn't fulfill the mission of fighting the war on drugs.
Right.
Okay, he's still there, and the drugs keep flowing. Ergo, he's in. But there's, if you decapitate the regime, there'll be somebody like Maduro that will come to power anyway. Okay, you'll enrage the population. Probably another wave of immigrants will go up north, and the drugs will still be there. No, every once in a while we got to pound them down. Okay, because we're on the war. It's a war on drugs, which is not dealing with the root causes of why we have this problem in the first place. No, this could be a reel that can be shown over and over again for the entirety of Trump's presidency.
Yeah. No, I think so. And
And then the other drug cartels in the region say, "Good, I'm glad they're messing with these guys because we're going to be making take up their market share." Okay,
right.
hold on.
Yeah. Um, that's right. It's no, I think this one's an easy one. It's kind of interesting. I mean, that this is that Trump did this, and but other things that Trump kind of mentioned. During the early days of his second term, he seems to have dropped them. And what happened to his taking over the Panama Canal? I mean, I haven't heard. I mean, I guess he could bring that up again at some point, but we haven't heard much about the Panama Canal
Well, I mean,
recently.
George, I mean, considering the nonsense on justifying this, we have to take over the Panama Canal to cut the flow of drugs.
You could took out the flow. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there's one. There's one for you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, he can do that. And then what was it? He was also going to take over Greenland. I mean, that he's kind of put that on the back burner. I mean, I haven't heard too much about that. And then, of course, the Canada thing, the 51st state, and that's all gone. So he kind of, whenever he turns his attention to the Western Hemisphere, he's always thinking, well, how can I thump somebody? And I just want to hit somebody today.
Yeah, and you have to
So,
wonder
so
too.
that okay, well, we didn't take over the Panama Canal, but maybe we can just simply take a whack at Maduro.
And my favorite bugaboo when it comes to the U.S. and the Western Hemisphere is that how much is Marco Rubio, calibrating this for
Right,
his
right,
own ends?
right,
Okay,
right.
is that we've pointed out before, it is really remarkable for this very self-centered egomaniac psychopath. He's always the president is directed. The president has said,
Yep, yep.
and never touches him. Oh no,
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 no, no,
no,
no. That's
no.
right. It's
And
like
then he'll flip. He'll take all the credit for everything that quote unquote went well, and what didn't go well, well, that was the president's decision.
and that's why when we watched that brief presser, that's exactly what he said. Oh well, this is the president. This is the president's policy. This is what the president wants. What about the legal justification? Well, I'm not a lawyer. Go take this up with the Pentagon's legal department. And so, what about some? Can you provide us with some details about the operation? Yeah, don't ask me. I mean, go take it up with someone else. Is very very smooth these performances of his, and yeah, absolutely. He'll just
You
he'll make
notice how he always has his hair very nicely
right.
coiffed and
Yeah,
that suit of it. It's always so
yeah,
presentable. And
always.
he get, I don't know if you noticed, but I instantly picked up on it. This kind of feigning friendliness, leaning in. Yeah, you, yeah.
Right, right.
Very, very slick.
Very, very, very slick. Yeah, yeah. And even his whole presentation, I mean, he's very immaculately tailored. I mean, everything, the suit, the tie, always immaculate. The hair, everything. It's like, you can almost smell. He smells so sweet, and when
And I've noticed that he keeps his entourage further away from him. They're standing back because if they get too close, then you notice how short he is. So he has his background to make him look more, have a greater stature. I'm sure that's a real complex for him, you know. I'm sure of that, okay? Because short men are very rarely elected president of the
No,
United
no,
States.
no, it, no, you can't do that. And I think, um, and I think people have looked into that, said that in every presidential election, it's always the taller man wins. It's so whoever is that, like it's like George H.W. Bush. He was obviously much taller than Michael Dukakis, but then Bill Clinton was taller than George H.W. Bush. Bill Clinton taller than Bob Dole. So it's always the dynamic that is taller. I think Reagan was taller than Jimmy Carter. So this is all. So that's always the way the
No
way.
one really knows how tall Donald Trump is.
No, no, no. That's right.
That's a
But interestingly,
statement.
I mean, yeah, J.D. Vance is quite tall,
Yeah.
which is also kind of an interesting when you have. I mean, and that was also true about George H.W. Bush. I mean, he was vice president, but when you saw him together with Reagan, he was quite a bit taller than Reagan. But they were on the ticket. But so in the same way, also you've got a vice president Vance who is taller than Trump, and given Vance's height, that puts him in a very strong position for 2028.
Yeah, and that when he like puts his hand on Marco, little pat.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then
And
when
so yeah, yeah.
they put him in the center of the couch in the Oval
No,
Office.
no, no. It was always
Somebody's working against him. Again,
yeah.
no,
That's right. That's
Marco,
always going to be yeah.
you sit there, okay. And then when Vance crosses his leg, then then Marco gets even smaller and smaller, and then he's just in between the cushions, okay, all
Yeah,
by
that's right.
design. No, this is. I find it personally really pathetic. I agree with George's analysis here. There's no downside pounding on a country they can't fight back. I mean, that's it. That's historical record.
Mm.
Maduro, he's been reincarnated as a drug lord, and this will work. I mean, if this is how they're going to cast, how changing, having further regime change in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, the MAGA movement's completely, absolutely down with it. Okay,
Yeah, that's right. And
and they're not interested in the niceties of international
no,
law.
no, not at all. And this is a juicy one for Trump because really nobody particularly likes Maduro. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
you're not going to get the New York Times saying, "Well, I
yeah.
don't, say I don't think it's right to go after Maduro." It's like he has no constituency. And so it's a very easy one for him, much as going after Saddam Hussein was very easy for George W. Bush because he didn't have any kind of a
Yeah, you
constituency.
could call him Sodom and get away with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's right. You can do that, and of course you make the argument about international law, but nobody cares about that. That's what Bush knew, and Madeleine Albright, and everybody knows. Nobody cares about international law. You can make all these arguments about well, it violates this treaty, it violates that UN resolution. All this is absolutely right. Ultimately, it isn't going to make any difference. It's just going to be, who's going to pummel whom, and nobody in the world is going to do anything
Well, we
about
did it. We did that short clip on Gaza Largo. Okay, I mean
it. Yeah,
that whole spiel that it was the Washington Post, right? That
that's
came
right.
out with that whole thing.
Yeah.
No one even questioned the legality of it. Not at all.
No,
I don't even think in that article it was even
no,
meant.
no, 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 that's right. That's right. You just say, well, look, Israel is in possession of it. Yeah, but it violates all these UN Security Council resolutions in being in possession of it. Well, who cares about what the UN Security Council? Israel is in possession of it, and that's possession is 9/10 of the law. I mean, that's pretty much it's not any more subtle than that. I mean, that's going to be the argument.
Well, particularly under this administration,
Right. It's like,
particularly.
okay, yeah, Israel possesses it, so that's it. Therefore, Israel can hand it over to the United States or not hand it over. It's entirely within Israel's prerogative.
Giving away something they don't own. Yep,
Yeah,
that's the way of the world.
yeah.
All right, everybody. We're going to keep an eye on this Venezuela story. I think this is going to be they're going to milk this one for all kinds of reasons.
Right.
Okay, um, the gangs in America, drugs, all of this, and it's going to make career. It's interesting destroying countries and societies as a making agenda for so many people in Washington. Okay, as someone put it to me once they screw up one country, the policy goes south. Well, they'll just move to another air-conditioned
Exactly.
office and find another country to do
Right.
the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly. That's exactly what happens. Yeah. That's what they did with Libya. Imperceptibly, they moved straight to Syria. Hey, what about Libya? And Libya is still total. It's a total basket case. It's forgotten. It's now was it almost 15 years now since that onslaught against Gaddafi. And Libya, I mean, there's no government in Libya. I mean, there used to be a government. There's no government in Libya. 15 years on, but how much attention is does anyone pay to Libya?
And anyone held accountable.
Not no no.
No, no, no. I mean, what was it? Sarkozy, he got in trouble for taking money, but
Yeah, yeah,
that's a domestic problem. It's
exactly. Yeah,
not in,
that's
there's no
right.
international
That's
consequences
that's
for it. It was
yeah.
just that, he got again another politician caught with him hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
all
Exactly.
right, everybody, this is Gaggle with Peter and George. This is our Wednesday edition. We're going to get back together on Friday. I get back to work next week, and so you'll see a lot more of me and George.
Good. Yep. So tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, please join me for the live stream. And though the dogs will not be there physically, but in spirit they'll be there, and they'll be keeping an eye on me and say, "Are you raising funds, while you're talking in the live stream? Is that the business plan?" They kind of they ask me. So in order to provide an answer for these really quite rude questions that they ask, if you have anything lying around, dump it into the tip jar. Whatever you've got. Your life savings and anything, whatever you've put away in the teapot, you just put it straight in. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, I'll be able to deal with these dogs in a kind of, in a kind of a man to dog relationship. I've never been good at.
They're uncompromising.
They're
Believe
uncompromising. They're not, they're not gentle the way we humans are. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.